Hello, friends. Welcome back to Penny for the Soul. Today, I bring you face to face with Narayani Basu, the young Delhi based foreign policy analyst, researcher, and author. She has carved a niche for herself by writing about unsung heroes of India's latest history. VP Menon, KM Panikkar, and CB Muthamma, India's first female diplomat, and some others. So she's coming to Goa this Saturday, December the 13th, and she'll be at the International Centre Goa, speaking at the ICG's Writers Studio Initiative, and she'll be speaking about those books. So, in this very short interview, more like a teaser, she speaks a little about Menon, Panikkar, and Muthamma. Sit back and enjoy. So, good morning, Narayani. Very happy to have you on our Frenny for the Soul, YouTube channel. And
Good morning.
welcome to Goa. You're going to be in Goa on Saturday at the International Centre Goa, and there's a lot of excitement already. Without much ado, I'm going to kick off by asking you, why have you chosen this niche genre, of research that is on unsung heroes of our recent Indian history. What made you choose that genre?
I think because, it's very easy to look at big names and household names of a movement like the independence movement. And they are very important in their own right. But as I've been researching both books on VP Menon and KM Panikkar, I've discovered that it's usually the people behind the scenes who actually do so much of the work that goes unrecognized. For instance, in VP Menon's case, you have a bureaucrat whose work is essentially boring, right? No one really wants to read about Babu's pushing files and pushing paper, but this was a man who crystallized the independence movement from behind the scenes. He was with Sardar Patel when the integration of the Indian states. He, drafted the Indian Independence Act. It was stuff that you don't necessarily think of when you're thinking of a movement like the independence movement. You don't necessarily think of the people behind the scenes. You don't even think sometimes that there are people behind the scenes, that there is paperwork that's involved in crystallizing a revolution, in legitimizing it, in bringing a nation together, that there could be a paper trail involved, that there could be actual negotiations happening behind the scenes, as in the case of K.M. Panikkar and, his role in the Chamber of Princes when he was pushing for federalism in the 1930s. And it's fascinating to me that we don't necessarily think of these people, and that sort of became something that I wanted to focus more on, because these are also people who are incredibly important when you look at an independence movement. There are also people, there are also communities, there are also so many things that we don't necessarily think of and we should think of.
Yeah, great, great. Thank you for that answer. Coming to VP Menon, from whatever
Yeah.
little reading I did, meaning
Yeah.
he was the frontline manager, so to say, who was negotiating while he worked very closely with Sardar Patel, people like Sardar Patel. The point is that he was the front man who was literally negotiating with the princes and getting them to coming into the Indian Union. But he's not got enough credit, possibly. Why do you think that's the reason?
I think sometimes, and this is the case also with KM Panikkar as well, because with the march of time and with the march of the years, sometimes what happens is that people who are behind the scenes get sort of sidelined by history and by public memory. Right. In the case of VP Menon, there was also the fact that you had very personal dynamics between himself and Nehru playing out behind the scenes as well. And again, all of this is happening behind the scenes of politics and behind the scenes of what was happening in India at the time. And in his day, VP Menon was one of the top civil servants that this government possessed. Um, And yet, as the years passed, people forgot him, right? I mean, when we talk of the integration of the Indian states, we talk of Sardar Patel. He's become the face of the integration of the Indian states, and for good reason. He was certainly, a pioneer in that, but he really couldn't have done so much of it without VP Menon at his side. He couldn't have done it without VP Menon doing the legwork that it required to traverse this country and to go and meet with all these princes and to go and meet with the rulers and to sit down and talk them into or coerce them into, as the case may be, into signing on the dotted line. So if you see the instrument of accession in the National Archives, it has VP Menon's signature on it, right? It was actually VP Menon who went and talked to all these people and got them on board. And in certain cases, yes, in the case of Hyderabad, etc., there was military action involved. But the legwork that was done, the drafting of the instrument of accession, which he did as early as 1937 in a sort of draft format, all of this was done by VP Menon. And it's the same with KM Panikkar as well. When you look at him and his career, there are parts of it that are remembered, not the whole picture, And so this sometimes happens with people who are prominent in certain aspects, but yet people sort of forget that there's this whole life that they have lived and these whole contributions that they've made that may not necessarily be only one aspect of their career.
Amazing. Yeah, yeah. No, spot on, really. No, coming to K.M. Panikkar, which is your latest book, his biography. From what I've read, K.M. Panikkar was India's first ambassador to China in 1948. What does your research show about Panikkar's contribution to early Indo-China relationships?
That's an answer that's huge, right? Because the first thing that you think of when you think of KM Panikkar at all is the fact that he was our most controversial ambassador to both nationalist China from 1948 to 1949, and then the People's Republic of China. Um, and honestly speaking, when I began digging through the archives and I began looking at his time in both Nationalist China and the People's Republic of China, what sort of came home to me was several things. One is that we, as a country who had just newly become independent, we didn't have trained career diplomats. So Panikkar himself was not a career diplomat. He was not a trained diplomat. We didn't have that at that point. You had Nehru basically sending out people whom he trusted, people whose opinions he trusted and whose minds he trusted, to important postings across the world, whether it was Washington, whether it was Moscow, whether it was China. Um, in Panikkar, he had a man whose mind he greatly not just trusted, but whose mind really interested him. He had been following Panikkar's career since the 1920s. And this was a man whom Nehru felt, okay, you could give a brief. And it's important to remember that all ambassadors, when they're sent out to wherever they are posted, they go with a certain brief from Delhi. Panikkar and Nehru were very much on the same page as far as this whole vision of Asian solidarity was concerned. In a decolonizing world, they both felt that India and China had the potential to come together as neighboring countries and big countries at that, and sort of lead the charge, so to speak, for Asian solidarity. What happens in the People's Republic of China, and it's also interesting to me that after the Civil War is over, Nehru sends Panikkar back to represent India in the People's Republic of China. Um, you have somebody, therefore, who is A, on the same page as Nehru as far as Asian solidarity is concerned, but B, definitely is, once he gets to the People's Republic of China, once he meets Mao and Zhou Enlai, he is definitely swept away by the potential of these guys, right? Um, it's led to this whole myth of K.M. Panikkar was a communist. That's not true, is what I discovered. he was definitely swept away by them. You have this memoir that he writes of his time in China, where he basically writes of Mao being this new age Moses who's going to lead his people towards the light, so to speak. And he describes Chou Enlai's fingers as being like tender green onion shoots. It's all very hilarious when you read it in 2025, right? And this is our ambassador who's writing in these lyrical terms. So definitely there was a sense of rose-colored spectacles, so to speak. Um, what I find interesting is that people tend to overlook the fact that there were multiple players as well. You have Nehru, definitely. You have the Ministry of External Affairs and the officials within it, who are all people who are warning Nehru that Panikkar's reports from China at the time were biased, to say the least. You have a prime minister who's choosing to not listen to these guys in who are sitting with him in the MEA in Delhi. You have the fact that this is a world that is dominated by the Cold War. So you have players like the United States in the picture. There are a number of factors also that must be taken into context when we talk about Panikkar's time in China. That being said, Panikkar makes this really grave error in the 1950s when he has the chance to discuss the border with Chou Enlai, and he does not do so because he assumes that Chou Enlai knows what the border is with India. Now, as a sitting ambassador, that's a rookie mistake to say the least, right? You do not assume anything. You have to be on the ball as far as that is concerned. That is the mistake that has haunted both India and China through the years, and it certainly haunted Panikkar's public career as far as China and after China was concerned.
Wow. So it's so interesting, really. That's why it's great to listen to researchers. So I'll come to something that really, interested me when I read, your note, and that is CB Muthamma. For one thing, India's first female diplomat. That
Correct.
kudos to her for that. And what is even more interesting is how she took on the government of India.
Yeah.
Because of career issues and this famous case CB Muttama versus Government of India. So and there were many positive reforms that came up after that. So can you throw light? I mean, can you throw light on that little saga about why she took up cudgels against the Government of India and what happened really? Yeah,
Well, I mean,
with that
again, it
case.
goes it goes back to the moment we become independent, and again, we don't have a fleet of career diplomats.
Mm.
So we are starting to now put the nuts and bolts in place to sort of train what will become the IFS.
Yeah.
There is a heavy gender bias involved in this, and it was very interesting to me as a researcher and as a woman, as a historian, to sort of look back through the archives and see the fact that the process of selection was as chauvinist and gendered as it was. And we were led by a prime minister who was very erudite, very progressive, considered to be the bastion of liberalism at the time. And yet, these were rules that were in place for decades after independence. If you were a woman and you were joining the IFS, you had to sign an undertaking which said that you could not and would not get married, right? And this led to the eventual loss of many capable women diplomats in the foreign service because many did choose to get married and then drop out of the foreign service. Um, when I was going through the archives, and many of them are oral archives, you have Meera Sinha Bhattacharjee, sort of recalling an interview that she had with Nehru at the time, and she was up for a posting to China. And she's in this room with Jawaharlal Nehru, and he says, and I'm paraphrasing here, I'm not really quoting what he actually said, but he said essentially that, you're very talented, and we would love to send you to China, but, you might get married, and then what will happen? And she remembered being extremely taken aback because, again, like I said, this was a prime minister who had this incredibly erudite, progressive public image. And yet, clearly, was a man of his times in the truest and most literal sense of the word, that, you ultimately block a woman's professional progress for the simple fact that she was a woman. And that is what happened with CB Muthamma. She signs the undertaking when she joins the IFS. Um, it's when she's up for a posting to foreign secretary, which is denied to her, that she eventually loses her temper. Um, and she says, I'm going to take the government of India to court, which is what she did. And I was really, really interested by that story because this was, you read about these stories of great feminists and, legends of great feminists. And this was a woman who really wasn't afraid to take on a system single-handedly, and the fact that she did that opened the doors for people like Nirupama Rao, like Sushma Swaraj. This was done by just a single act, that you eventually stand up for what is due to you and what is right. And in doing that, you change an entire system for the better. And that's what really interested me about CB Buthamma.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you, Narayani. We can, go on and on. Then, what will happen to the your talk on Saturday at the International Centre Goa. So we are going to keep more for ICG and our interaction with you at ICG. So welcome to Goa once again. So see you
Thank
soon.
you.
Yeah, thank you
See
for
you
your
soon,
time.
Rahul. Thank you so much.
Bye. Bye.